Civilization 7 has been out for almost 2 months now, and with over 600 hours in the game, I'm finally ready to start the tier list. A tier list is something that I'm always careful about because everybody feels passionate about different things. So it's important before we get into this, I set the rules of this tier list and make sure that everyone who's watching this understands exactly how we're assessing these leaders. When we look at a leader, there's a lot of different things that goes into what makes them. Not just the name, not just the portrait, but all the bonuses that they've got. First and foremost, they've got their bonus, which is their, for here as an example, Ada, we've got the cultural and scientific. These are their attributes. These determine what things they can do throughout the game with regard to their collaborations. Can they send a science agreement, a cultural agreement? Compare that to someone like Amina, who will send an economic agreement or a militaristic. So that's the first component, and that is something that we will be considering today. The second part is something that you can't actually see here on the UI, and that is their bias. Every leader, or at least most leaders, have got a bias towards something. Some leaders don't have a bias at all, such as Ada Lovelace. She doesn't actually have a bonus or a bias at all, whereas Amina has a bonus towards desert and plains. So this is another consideration that we're going to be looking at. One of the key components for this tier list is assessing the consistency of these leaders. We know that, as an example, some leaders can be very, very good if they roll the right circumstances, whereas some leaders are a lot better no matter where they start, no matter the civ that they play on. So that's what we're going to be assessing them based on. Now, further to that, we're not going to be looking at mementos at all when it comes to your leaders' mementos. That's not going to be gated by unique civics because the unique mementos, they're not unique. Anyone can just come in and unlock these, and you can use Note G with Amina if you want to do that. So we're not going to be considering mementos when it comes to this, and there might be synergies that are really strong with some leaders. As an example, great synergies exist down here with Wampum Belt, +1 production per age in settlements for each city-state you're a suzerain of, and Tecumseh, but we're not going to be including that. So just keep that in mind. That's not going to be included. Further to that, we'll also be looking at civ pairings, so we'll be giving a recommendation for what the best civ is, but we will also be reducing the rating of leaders that are required to play certain civilizations. Now, when I say required, that's obviously, you know, there's an element of you don't have to play the civilization, but there's a huge amount of bonuses if you do. As an example, if you're playing as Ibn Battuta, I would definitely recommend that you play with the Greeks. And that is because of the way that he plays, the city-state style that he plays. It is just only made even stronger with the Greeks. So that will also have points that are deducted because of that. So keep that in mind as we're going through the video, that there is consistency is also an element in flexibility as well. So let's make sure we bring that out. We're not going to be looking at unique unlocks. So as an example, Ada here, she's got unique unlocks for things like, plus 15% culture, minus 10% science in the exploration age. We don't really care about that stuff. We will be looking at the leader over the course of the game. So it's not just antiquity for this video. It is exploration. It's also modern. But in saying that, just keep in mind that I would estimate that probably about 85% of the hard work for winning a game is done in the age of antiquity. The rest of it, and it depends, right? Because I think we should always also caveat this video with, this is for single player only. This is not for multiplayer. Multiplayer is a whole different kettle of fish. Single player, this is it. Ideally up against the Deity AI. And the reason why I'm providing that caveat is because the Deity AI has a very strong bonus in the early game, especially for military. They start with a lot of military units. They get a lot of military units out. It makes it very hard to war against them. You can war against them. You can war against them successfully. However, it just makes it a lot harder. They also go for a lot of early war wonders. So playing that style is a lot more difficult than a more consistent style where you're going to be playing SimCity. So that's the primary thing that we're going to be looking at when it comes to the strength of the leaders. That's the way that we're going to be assessing it. We're not going to be looking at age unlocks either. So, you know, Great Britain is a great civilization, and therefore we think Ada is a higher rating. We're not going to be doing that. It's just going to be based on the merits of the leader. Further to that, we're also going to be taking a little bit of the meta, which I know is it's a painful word, but it's just something that we have to we just have to acknowledge exists. And the reason why we're doing that is just because there's a city meta that has begun to evolve, and that means that cities are now more powerful than what they previously were. Basically, you want to have lots of cities. That's the way that it currently feels at the moment. So without further ado, let's get to it. Just keep in mind, this is my tier list. Yours might be completely different, and that is okay. I'll give you the thinking, or give you the idea behind why I give each of these ratings. So we'll start off, we'll do it in alphabetical order, and we'll start with Ada Lovelace. So she's a cultural and scientific leader. There's only 2 of these in the game. The other one is Catherine. And these are great because it means that you get early culture and early science immediately as the game starts. If you meet any other civilization, you can send them out an agreement. And that is a very powerful thing because +6 culture or science from the very beginning of the game is great. Not only that, but she is going to be scaling with science per age when you complete a civic mastery. So if we think about the Age of Antiquity, there are 3 key masteries that we're looking to complete early on, and that's going to be the one that unlocks Gate of All Nations, the one that unlocks Mundo Perdito, and the one that sits under Code of Laws. So there's 3 primary ones that you're doing, which basically means relatively early in a game, you're going to be able to get +6 science per age for every city. And this is really key here. Cities. That's not just the capital. That is every single city. So if you've got 4 cities, that's 6 science times 4, 24 science. It is quite a bit of science. And obviously this also stacks up throughout the game. So there's a total of 4 civic masteries that you can get. And then depending on the civilization that you play, some civilizations have 0, such as Egypt, they get 0 masteries. Whereas some civilizations, such as the Greeks, that's not the Greeks, such as the Greeks or the Romans, that's not the Romans, there's the Romans, they get more civics, and this counts for those unique civics. So this number can start to really get quite big, especially after you get to like 6 or 7 cities. So this is quite a powerful bonus. Further to that, you also gain culture equal to 50% of your total science per turn when you complete a technology mastery. Not such a big deal. Really not that huge, and I don't think you really want to let it affect the way that you play, but obviously the sooner you're completing those masteries, the sooner typically you're going to be getting codexes, and it's a great way to sort of boost up the culture, and definitely something it's not a bad thing, right? But the primary gain is going to be the fact that you could be looking at +8, +10 science per city, and if you've got 5 cities, that's 50 science, and that's going to get amplified by things like incense, and other further amplification. So I think when it comes to Ada and putting her on a tier list, we've got to go with a solid position here, just simply because she is a consistent leader. When it comes to playing a SimCity style, she is quite strong, and especially against the AI, she is powerful when it comes to this because she's going to be able to keep up on the science. So she'll go into the A or into the S tier, and that'll be our first leader for the day. Second one, we're moving straight into Amina. Now, I will say right now, Amina has actually come up quite a bit in my mind because when it comes to her consistency, things have changed. Well, we're now focused more on the cities. So she's an economic and militaristic leader. When it comes to her bias, she's got plains and desert as her bias, and plains and desert aren't that good. Realistically, there's nothing that really makes you go, oh wow, that's great. However, they do have more camels in them, which are great. So camels spawn on both plains and desert, so that's always a good thing. You've also got combat strength to all units in plains and desert, and this is a bit of an awkward thing because it basically means if you spawn in plains and desert and anyone tries to attack you, you've basically got 5 combat strength all the time, whether you're attacking, whether you're defending. That's great. However, it means you can't really go out of the plains and the desert, and that can be problematic. If people, or if you want to go and declare war outside of the plains and deserts, you're kind of limited in that regard. Of course, you can do it, but you're not going to be taking advantage of that bonus. By the same token, if anybody dares to come towards the plain and the deserts, you could look to try and cause a little bit of pain towards them, but that's not the main focus here. The main focus is going to be on the resource capacity in cities and the +1 gold per age for each resource assigned to cities. The more gold that you've got, the sooner you can convert cities over. So that makes a lot of sense. And the extra resource capacity in cities actually makes quite a bit of sense because once you start moving more resources into cities, you're going to run out of space. And if you don't have camels, then you're quickly going to run out of space. So this actually works quite well together with the new sort of city meta that's come through. You've got economic and militaristic as your 2 primary attributes. I don't really rate either of these in the early game. Mainly the militaristic one is the big one. I think if you're going to be looking at spending your influence, ideally you probably want to be spending it on city-states or taking any relationships that are very close to you that might not be on plains and deserts and looking to get control of that. But realistically, from a SimCity perspective, Amina is, I wouldn't say particularly strong, but her bonuses are consistent. The only downside, realistically, is that when it comes to pairing her with civilizations, and I don't think we actually gave a recommendation for Ada on civilization pairings, but I will just say right now, I think the Greeks go quite well with her. But for Amina, the most obvious one is something like Axum, and that limits you even further because it's a bit coastal, but I don't want to get too deep in the weeds with it. So we'll go ahead, we'll give Amina a rating. It's going to be a little bit higher than what I'm sure many people were expecting, the B tier. I think that Amina's actually pretty solid when it comes to playing against the AI, so that's where she's going to go. Let's move on now. We've got the first of the Ashokas, the World Conqueror, another one who has shot up in the city meta, and that's primarily because he gets extra production for every 5 excess happiness in cities. When it comes to these other bonuses, I'll be honest, I don't even really consider them. 10% production in settlements not founded by you. Sure, this can make a little bit more sense in Exploration Age, or if you decide to go on a warpath, but against the Deity AI, you're going to be facing difficulty in the early game, looking to try and combat them. And because of that, it makes it more difficult to justify. You do get a celebration if you declare a formal war, but generally you're going to be happy enough that you don't really need to be relying on this to be getting it. But obviously once you do, you're also going to be getting the combat strength against districts. This is great if you are going to war, but typically we're going to try and avoid that play style, especially in the early stages of the game, and the main focus is just on simming. And +1 production for every 5 excess happiness in cities is actually quite good, because if you've got 5 or 6 cities, they're all getting that excess happiness. It could be 25, 30 happiness that they're all getting. That's +6 production that all of them are getting. And the moment you turn over that city from a town into a city, it is now getting that extra production. So that's quite big. When it comes to the diplomatic and militaristic, once again, these are both bonuses that don't really work in the early stages of the game. So compared to somebody like Ada, who gets the cultural and the scientific, it's very strong early, not as strong later on. Whereas diplomatic and militaristic is not so strong early, but much stronger late. Guaranteed to have that increase in military strength, which is lovely if you're going to war. Diplomatic is going to be giving you the happiness that you need, which is going to provide you excess happiness in your cities, which gives you more production. So you can basically look at this diplomatic bonus as being a bonus that is going to be giving you production, which is very, very cool in my mind. Now, Ashoka doesn't actually have any bias, so he's going to be dependent on the civilization that you play, but he's quite flexible in the civilizations that you can play. You can pair him up with Mississippi, you can pair him up with Greece, or you could just go with the OG and pair him up with Moria. But we're going to be putting him today in the A tier. He's going to be going in A tier, so we've already got a very strong start from our leaders here today, weighted towards the top side, and that is only going to continue the further down this list we go, because our next one is his it's his alter ego, Ashoka World Renouncer. Now, initially when I was looking at Ashoka, I got very excited by the all buildings gain +1 happiness adjacency. It basically means you can go over the settlement limit and you don't really have to observe it. However, this can hurt you because even just 5 happiness is going to be 1 less food in cities. Now, we know that food in cities isn't really that important. The most important thing is just having a lot of cities and then utilizing the yields from them. But food doesn't hurt. If it means you can grow more, that's not a bad thing. On top of that, you also get additional food in settlements during a celebration, which means you don't have to go into the oligarchy government type as often as you typically would. So these are all very strong things. On top of that, you also do get a quite strong early game bonus, which is the expansionist bonus. This is going to be giving you food in all of your towns. So you can use this to get your towns up to speed a little bit faster. Ideally, you wouldn't want to be spending your influence in the early game on something like this, but it can be good at building relationships if you've got somebody that's a little bit closer, and it's a decent way to actually spend that influence if you want to avoid going to war. So overall, I think the strength of Ashoka, once again, is just going to be on SimCity, making sure you can build up a very strong empire. You don't need to observe the settlement cap nearly as much. It's almost like you're playing Xerxes in that you've got a free settlement cap just because you're going to be so happy all the time. And you can actually play. He's the only leader that I think can get away with it consistently. You can play over the settlement cap and just ignore it completely. So that is one of the few bonuses that you have with Ashoka compared to any other leader. So that's Ashoka. Overall, I think he's a very strong SimCity leader. And if we were going to put him on a tier list, which we are going to be putting him on a tier list, he's going to be joining his alter ego in the A tier right here, and making that top side of the tier list already quite a little bit heavy. Next up, we've got Augustus. Oh boy, Augustus. I tell you what, when Civ 7 initially came out, I was looking at Augustus and I'm like, man, this guy is amazing. This is crazy, dude. Every town is going to give the capital 2 production. That's amazing. But now, after I've been getting, cities at turn, we see cities coming along at like turn 29, another city coming online at turn 45. So you've already got 3 cities and you're only at turn 45. And now you start to realize, okay, hold on a minute. I don't have a whole lot of towns because all of my settlements are being turned into cities. And then you can purchase culture buildings in towns. Well, hold on a minute. Why would I need to purchase culture buildings in towns when I could just build them in my cities instead? And then all the gold that you're going to be purchasing buildings in towns with is now just getting spent on cities. Now, of course, this is coming at it from the mindset that cities are better than towns, okay? And I just want to also put in here the fact that you can still play this the old way. And I don't want to say that, you know, there's the right way to play Civ and the wrong way to play Civ. That's definitely not the case. I think that Augustus is still a strong leader if you're looking to play around towns. I just don't think towns are as strong as cities. And because of that, I feel like we have to bring the power level of Augustus down. Now, he's a cultural and expansionist leader. Cultural leaders are quite strong because they are just going to have a whole bunch of culture out of the gate. They can get into really early things like pantheons a lot sooner. They can get into their unique civics a lot sooner. They'll have a whole lot more culture that is in the bank ready to go. And it means that you don't have to focus on monuments. It means that you can go into an early library if you've got a good adjacency. But the weakness that he's got is really just coming back to the towns. Now, when it comes to his leader bias, he doesn't actually have a leader bias, so he joins Ashoka's as well as Ada in that one. Unfortunately, no leader bias there. But realistically, for Augustus, as I said, I think the biggest downfall of him at the moment is just the fact that the meta has changed. And as the game receives more balance patches, this is obviously going to change, and undoubtedly in the future they will probably change towns and cities, because I don't think it's sustainable having it the way that they've got it now, because it kind of just gets rid of their whole idea. So we'll go ahead, we'll put Augustus down in the B tier. Sorry, Augustus, you've fallen very far from, I think our first tier list had him up in the S tier, just because the extra purchasing power of gold in towns was pretty good back then. All right, so now we move on to Benjamin Franklin. He's one of my favorites. I like Benjamin Franklin a lot. Even though I wouldn't call him a super top level leader, he's still got some amazing bonuses. So first and foremost, he's got an early game bonus being scientific and diplomatic. So this is going to give him happiness in the late game. We want to make as many cities as we can. He's going to get his cities up and running very quickly, plus 50% production towards constructing production buildings. This is a very powerful bonus. On top of that, you compare it with civilizations like Mississippians. By the way, I don't think we gave a recommendation here for Augustus for civilizations. Carthage, number one. Rome, also very good. So for Benjamin Franklin, and for Ashoka World Renouncer, Mississippians, Moria, the same as Ashoka World Conqueror. So for Benjamin Franklin, the big thing though for me is definitely that 50% production towards constructing production buildings. It means that you can have all of your cities come online sooner. It means that you can just sort of, your limiting factor here is gold. You plant down all the towns. How quickly can you get them to convert over to cities? It's going to be based on your gold. So pairing him with a civilization like Mississippi or Axum can be actually quite strong, because it means you can get all of your cities out very, very quickly. So that is the angle from Ben Franklin. So I think from a SimCity perspective, a very strong leader. The only thing is you can have two endeavors of the same type that are active at a time. This can be good after you start getting in towards like the mid, towards the later stages of antiquity. This can be really good because it means that you can actually have multiple diplomatic agreements that are sent out. So you're getting a whole bunch of happiness, and that's going to be just driving you and your happiness levels quite high. You can go over the settlement limit quite a bit from that. On top of that, you also get the science for production buildings, which is just a lovely little bonus. The sooner that you get this in the early game, the better. And then you also get the 1 science per age from active endeavors you've started or supported. So this starts to build up over the course of an era. But still, I don't think it's particularly noticeable, especially because realistically with endeavors, you want to be sending out a scientific, but you also want to be focusing on choosing city-states. And I think that's probably a pretty big component now of playing against the Deity AI. So overall for Ben Franklin, once again, he does not have a starting bias. That means that, you know, he doesn't spawn on the coast. He just takes whatever his civilization is. So if I had to put him in any tier, which I have to, because we're doing a tier list, he's going to be going into the A tier as well. Benjamin Franklin. If we're going to pair him with a civilization, we'd be looking to play him with the Mississippians. The Greeks are also quite good with him. He's an incredibly flexible leader, though, and I would say that right now. I think he's great with pretty much anything, just because of that 50% production towards constructing production buildings. To be honest, I think there's a world where he probably even moves up to the S tier in the future, but we'll have to wait and see how it goes. All right, well, let's move into our next leader. It's going to be Catherine the Great. So she's a cultural and scientific leader. We've already talked about Ada, who has the same bonus as her, which means this is an early game yield boosting leader. Basically, you can get to a lot of technologies, a lot of civics faster than any other leader can do that, just simply because you're the one that's in control of sending out those agreements. And you got to keep in mind, right, if you're only making 10 culture per turn and you send out an agreement, now all of a sudden you're up to 16, everyone else is still on 10, that's a pretty big bonus. So one of the things that I love to do with Catherine is take advantage of this first bonus that she's get. Plus 2 culture per age on displayed great works. So for every codex you get, she gets 2 culture from that. It's not just the science, it's also the culture. On top of that, buildings with great work slots, like the library, gain an extra additional slot. On top of that, cities settled in Tundra gain science equal to 25% of their culture per turn. Not as important, but still, obviously, you want to be trying to focus your settling in Tundra. So one of the things that I like to do with her is just quite literally rush the library, and it's going to be a +2 culture, and then you get a quest, which gives you another codex, and then you get a second quest, which gives you another codex, and basically the moment you build your library, you get +6 culture in it, which is just incredible, and obviously +6 science as well. She's just, when it comes to her yields as a leader, she is so far ahead of every other leader. And on top of that, it's not just the fact that she's cultural and scientific. The biggest thing about this leader is her bias, her starting bias. She has, and she's the only leader in the game that has got this, and this is what makes her so powerful. She has a Tundra start bias. And the reason why Tundra is so good is because of the resources that come in the Tundra. All of the good resources in the game come in the Tundra, except for camels. So gypsum comes in there. We've got jade. We've got, what else have we got? We've got basically all the mining resources. Salt is another really good one. Now, you might be wondering, okay, well, hold on a minute. Jade's not a good resource. What are you talking about? It's not a good resource, but the actual mine itself, so the yields that you're getting from that resource are very, very good. And that's what makes Catherine so good, because you want to be working mines. So when you're thinking about what civilization you're going to pair her with, the Greeks are the first ones that, you know, really come to my mind, because you can basically guarantee that you've always got culture, always got science, always got production, and you've always got a Tundra start, which just makes it incredible. So when it comes to putting Catherine on a tier list, this one is an easy one for me. Not quite at the top of the table, as I'm sure many people would probably suspect. She is going to go in the S tier, though. She is an incredibly consistent leader, able to constantly, no matter the civ, no matter the situation, she will be able to have a great game. And I think that's what makes her just so damn good. All right, so let's move on to our next leader. It's going to be Charlemagne, who is a militaristic and scientific leader. So he gets that early game bonus of plus science, and he also gets that bonus of additional military strength, or combat strength is probably the better way to say it, because that's the actual name of it. So his military and science buildings receive a happiness adjacency for quarters. This is not really something that you're going to focus on, because typically, if we think about military and science buildings, you're going to be building them together, and you're going to be building them next to resources. So you're not, ideally, you don't want to have them next to quarters, but if you do have them next to quarters, then it is a nice little bonus. So you're going to be looking at maybe 4, 6 science for each of these quarters that you've got built around your empire and your city. So that does start to add up. It means that you could be looking at between 8 and 12 extra happiness for each of your cities. And of course, with Charlemagne, he's got additional bonuses for celebration. So the more happy you are, then the more you celebrate. And the more celebrations, that means the more cavalry you're getting for free. Now, keep in mind, one of the things that I mentioned earlier was this is not a tier list for multiplayer. Charlemagne in multiplayer online is absolutely broken. And that is because this ability right here does not scale with game length. It means that if you enter a celebration in online game speed, you're getting 2 free cavalry units every 5 turns, because you just go back-to-back celebration, 2 free cav every single 5 turns. However, if you were to compare that to standard speed, you're only getting those 2 free cav units every 10 turns. So there's a lot less impact in that regard when it comes to how strong and how out of the gates you can really get with this, because there's quite a lot that you can do. But then you also get the 5 combat strength for cav units during a celebration. So Charlemagne is an incredibly powerful leader who has a wonderful timing right as he unlocks his cavalry. So that's the main focus of him. But even if he can't do that, even if he doesn't go for a timing attack and looks to take out a neighbor with this, he's still quite a strong Sim City leader just because of the bonuses that he gets to happiness. And this is going to be guaranteed. It means that you can go over the settlement cap. It means you don't have to think as much about it once you start reaching the later stages of the game. You're always going to have that happiness in the back pocket. You're always going to have celebrations. You're always going to have those extra policy slots. And that's always a good thing. We always want to try and have that as much as we possibly can. So the only reason why I'm not rating Charlemagne higher than what we're going to be doing today is the fact that he is dependent. In my mind, he is very dependent on the Moria. He's incredibly good with the Mauryan civilization, but just because he's still good with other civilizations. I want to stress that now. It's just that with the Moria, with Indian Moria, he is incredible, because they get all of these happiness bonuses. If we go take a look at them just quickly, they get pretty much every single bonuses for happiness. And they also get unique cav, which just stacks up even better with him. So there's a lot of things that really make sense for Charlemagne together with the Mauryan Indians, but he is reliant on them for that strength level. So just keep that in mind. If you've got him with the Moria, you're probably playing in like the S to S plus tier. But outside of that, it's pretty much in the A tier with any other civ. All right, we move on to our next leader, Confucius, another one who has had a pretty big fall from grace. Initially, when I went through the leaders, the first time I was playing Civ 7, I was like, man, Confucius looks like the bomb, dude. 25% growth rate in cities? That is crazy, dude. Growth is always a good thing, right? Well, not really. Not anymore. It used to be good, but then they changed the way that growth worked. The way that it used to work is this meant that your citizens cost 25% less. If you used to pay 100 food for your citizens, now you only pay 75 for your citizens. And they've changed the way that the mechanic works, and that is no longer the case. It is much less than that. And because of that, this bonus is kind of terrible. And on top of that, because they've nerfed growth so much, it means that the bonus that you get for having specialists is even worse, because you're being rewarded for having a lot of specialists, but you can't have a lot of specialists because they nerfed growth. And so because of that, this is one of those things where it's like, maybe in the next patch, you'll be crazy good. But unfortunately, for the moment, these things, they just got hit really hard, mainly the growth change. And I'll be honest, that was because of a video where we completely broke the game with Confucius. So sorry, Confucius. We may be responsible for your downfall, but look, we'll hopefully see you one day again in the future. So he's got some pretty good combos though. Expansionist and Scientific. Scientific, you've got that early power in the early game. Expansionist, you're going to be able to grow your towns quite large with that +3 food. It's always nice to have that in. But remember that the main focus for your early games should be on building those relationships, taking optimal. You should be taking optimal collaborations. So cultural, scientific, those are going to be the key ones. And then choosing city-states. So while this is definitely a good thing, it's not always going to be a focus. But unfortunately for Confucius, while he may have previously been a strong leader, not today. He's going to be going in the C tier. Now, I suspect this may change with the city meta. Obviously, the way that the city meta is at the moment, it's more about it's more about building up a lot of cities. So the fact that he gets additional growth in cities is a good thing. So I suspect this probably will change in the future. Once the growth sort of gets reworked, I think that he'll probably rise to the top again. But at the moment, the way that the playstyle currently exists, it only really makes sense. There's a couple of civilizations that you can pair him with. So Khmer makes sense to pair him with. Outside of that, I think realistically Khmer is the biggest one because they get a lot of bonuses for specialists, and that's his playstyle. He wants to play into specialists. He wants to try and get as many as he can. So maybe even like 3 to 4 big cities, and they're just having as many specialists as you can. It's kind of hard to do though. That's the problem, especially with the Khmer because they don't get settlement bonuses. So yeah, that's pretty much where we're at. All right, next up, we've got the 2 Friedrich. So we got blue Friedrich, Friedrich Baroque, and we've got orange Friedrich Oblique. I know that there's going to be one person on the One More Turn Discord that is very excited as we get to this stage because he absolutely loves Friedrich. I'm talking about Steve. He's a little bit of a celebrity on the One More Turn Discord, so shout out to you, Steve. Let's talk a bit about Friedrich. So this is the sad Friedrich, and this one is the happy Friedrich, and that is because this one is not as good as the other one. So we'll start off with the blue boy. So you get a free great work when you capture a settlement for the first time. Yep, okay. Oh, fair enough. So basically, you take a town and you get +2 science. That's it. Now, obviously, once we go into exploration era, congratulations, now you've got a relic, and that's 2 culture and 2 happiness. But this is so... oh, man, don't get me started. This is just the saddest bonus that you could ever have. Now, the other thing is that you gain an infantry unit when you construct a culture building. Now, this is actually something that has, in my mind, gotten quite a bit stronger because now all of a sudden we're not just constructing 2 or 3 culture buildings, or rather we're not just having 2 or 3 cities that we're constructing culture buildings in. We're actually having 5, 6, 7 cities across our empire just in the age of antiquity where we're now able to build a culture building. And on top of that, not only are we getting the 1 culture building in the monument, we're getting the 2nd culture building, which is going to be our amphitheater. So now if we extrapolate that, all of a sudden you're getting, say, 6 infantry units every time you build a monument, or, well, for every monument, for all your monuments, and then you get another 6 for your amphitheaters. So now, out of the entirety, or during the entire antiquity, you've gotten 12 free infantry units. And there's a world where I'm actually thinking, hold on a minute, this could be good. Now, it doesn't actually give you any bonus to simming, right? Like, if you compare it over to Ben Franklin, right? Ben Franklin actually just goes crazy with his cities and how quick they grow. Whereas Friedrich, that doesn't happen. But the fact that you're just getting these infantry units means that you can focus on getting those settlers out, on building up those cities, and you don't have to spend that production on infantry, on defense. So I do think that that has got some value in it. He was previously in the lowest tier, but we're not going to be putting him in the lowest tier today. Instead, he's going to be joining Confucius in the C tier. So he has moved up in the world of tier lists. Now, the other thing to note is he's a militaristic and a cultural leader. A cultural leader is always nice for the early game tempo that you're going to get. That extra 6 culture is absolutely welcome. Militaristic definitely makes a little bit more sense. You know, if we look at his kit from that sort of holistic perspective, there is definitely an element that he wants to go to war here. It's just the only trouble is that when you go to war, there's really not a lot of extra reward for it. You might not even bother mentioning this. It just seems irrelevant. Anyway, let's move over to our next leader, which is the other Friedrich Oblique. And this guy, he's a little bit more fun. And the reason why is because he's actually got, and look, I probably shouldn't rate him so highly just because his strategy, there's one strat that you can do, which is absolutely so much fun with him. So he is a militaristic and scientific leader. So we've already talked about, you know, the fact that scientific is good to have early on. It also means that you're going to be getting attribute points throughout the game that are going to be scientific. So that's going to be quite nice as well because there's some good points down there, like +1 science per quarter, which is great if we've got a huge empire with lots of quarters in it. But the key here is that we're actually looking to stack up a whole bunch of bonuses with him, and it starts all with army commanders getting the merit promotion or the merit commendation. So they basically start with, you know how the army commanders have got the bonuses at the bottom? That's what the merit commendation is. That's the big one that you get once you complete the tree. They start with +1 command radius. So you could go ahead and you can stack this up. So what you could do is you can just go grab the Mississippians and they get access to the Burning Arrow, which is a unit that you can use to pillage. And then what you can do is you can research a technology or a unique civic for them, which allows them to pillage from range for a cheaper cost. And then you can get the Mausoleum of Theodorich. And the Mausoleum of Theodorich also gives you a bonus to how much health you receive and how many yields you get when you pillage. And so basically, you're just going over the map, just going to war with everybody and just pillaging everything and just getting paid to do it, getting paid a lot more than what you would previously. And because you've got a larger command radius, it means that you can take advantage of things like there is one point that you can get where you increase the amount of healing that you do. And it means that if you've ever got a unit that is low health, all you need to do is just put them out onto a tile, get them to pillage, and immediately they just come up to full health. And it can be very powerful when you're playing this kind of style, but obviously it is a very specific style. So I don't want to go ahead and call this S tier because it's very specific. It's very niche. And on top of that, the AI always loves to rush Mausoleum of Theodorich, or at least in my experience, it's a very difficult world wonder to get. Maybe just because I don't prioritize that side of the civic tree as much as I probably should, but I never find myself really getting that. I'm constantly being beaten to it by the AI. So that's pretty much it. The other thing is that you gain an infantry unit when you construct a science building. If we're thinking about the city meta and the fact that we're extrapolating based on the fact that we're going to be having 3 cities by turn 50, we're ideally aiming for like 6 or 7 cities, then that's +7 infantry, and then you get +7 infantry again at our academy. So this is a whole bunch more infantry that we can now roll in to our strategy. So that's the current thought process behind Friedrich Oblique. Sorry, Steve, we can't put him up any higher than the B tier today, but I'm sure you'll still be happy with that. He's definitely been on the rise. Both of these Friedrichs have. It's taken some time for us to get there, but in the end, we've managed to make it this far. All right, next up, everybody's favorite, Tubman. There she is. And look, we're not going to mess around. We're not going to mess around. You know where she's going. All the way to the top. All the way to the top. Let's talk about why she is so damn good. Why is Tubman such a good leader? Why is she S+ tier? The reason why Tubman is so damn good are these bonuses right here. Plus 100% influence towards initiating espionage actions. The reason why this is good is because you want to be doing espionage as much as you can. Every time you do espionage, you're going to be gaining whether science, culture, or migrants. And migrants are the key here because migrants allow you to grow cities that otherwise would take a very long time to grow. We already talked about how growth is not particularly good anymore after they nerfed it. But one of the things they haven't nerfed is migrants. And migrants allow you to grow your cities without the need for food. So this basically means that you can have a whole bunch of growth that is occurring and you can do it at a discount price. What this means, 100% influence towards initiating espionage actions. Your espionage actions are half the price that everybody else pays. She's the only leader that can do it. And because espionage is so damn good, she can be constantly doing this. Now, not only is there an upfront cost, there is also a cost that happens per turn when you're doing the espionage. And it just means that because her upfront cost, oh gosh, that was very close. Her upfront cost is so low that even though you're losing influence over these turns or having your influence reduced, you're still able to build up influence and still going to be able to perform those espionage actions. So it's just incredible. On top of that, the second point, gosh, where do we stop with her? Jeez Louise. gain 5 war support on all wars declared against you. This is just insane. This is so crazy. The reason why this is so crazy is because when you look at war support, often the first thing that you look at is the cost of the first point, and you're like, it's not that crazy. It's only 60 influence that she's getting times 5. Okay, but one thing to remember is that with war support, when you put a point into war support, it's going to increase the cost. It goes from 60 influence on standard speed to 90, to 120, to 150, to 180. It constantly goes up like that. And it means that every single time you put a point into war support, or your enemy puts a point into war support, she's getting even more value from this. Because these 5 points of war support are always the most expensive points of war support, because these are free. They are tacked onto the end. They are always, you do not have to pay for them. These are, like, she has a baseline level, and it is just 5 war support that she starts off with, which means any war from the beginning is rigged in her favor. And that's what makes her so powerful. On top of that, I know that we said we're not going to talk about mementos or other bonuses, but like Gate of All Nations with her, you can't war her. It's not possible. It's just so hard, dude. 7 war support. On top of that, not that we've talked much about multiplayer, but she's very good in multiplayer as well, because you can just basically go and attack somebody, and if anyone tries to declare war on you, they can't, because you're just going to crush their units. Another thing that we haven't really talked about is just the reason why war support is so good is because of the way that combat strength works in Civilization 7. It's not so much the difference between the two numbers in terms of like 5 versus 15, where you go, oh wow, 15 is 3 times as much as 5. It must absolutely destroy the unit. No, what actually matters is the difference between those numbers. I guess the best way to say it would be in like relative terms. So like 15 and 5, there's only a 10 difference. Whereas 80 and 100, there is a 20 difference. And that makes a much bigger jump in the outcome of those battles that happen. And because of that, it means that 5 war support is incredible, because it puts you up towards that really high level. So that's primarily the reason why Tubman is so damn good. We're not even going to need to talk about this. This is pretty much all that matters. On top of that, units ignore movement penalties from vegetation. It means she can get settlers into sneaky little positions and forward settle your capital, and you didn't even know it was coming, because she's just there. She's too good. She is so damn good. I wouldn't be surprised if she gets nerfed. Maybe bring this down from like 5 war support to 3 war support. It's too good. It's way too good. All right, well, we've talked about the top end of the table, Harriet Tubman. Let's talk about the bottom end of the table, Hatchepsut. Oh, Hatchepsut. You know, growing up, we watched those videos of Ed. He was playing Hatchepsut and talking about how she had such great synergy with Egypt. Oh, by the way, I don't think we talked about, just to quickly recap civilizations, Khmer is the one for Confucius. For Friedrich, Baroque, I don't know, bro. Maybe Rome could make sense, because you're getting like the culture spam. For Friedrich, Oblique, probably want to be playing Mississippians. That's the good stuff. And then for Harriet, she can literally play any civilization. That's the great thing about her. S+ tier, just because she can play any civ. She doesn't care. Obviously works incredibly well with the Maya though, so give her a go on those. Hatchepsut. The reason why I was thinking about the civilizations is because she is locked in as hard as you can on a civilization pairing, and that is Egypt. It feels like it is mandatory to play Hatchepsut with Egypt, and that's tough, right? Because you don't really want to be locked into one civ. You want to have flexibility. Maybe you like making world wonders, and that's absolutely okay. You play Hatchepsut, go for it, go crazy. But the thing is, the main thing that's ruining Hatchepsut for me is her bias. So we didn't talk about the vegetation bias that Harriet Tubman has, because it wasn't really that relevant. But Hatchepsut's bias is incredibly relevant because it's a navigable river bias. Now, she gets bonuses for navigable rivers. She gets extra production towards buildings and wonders that are in cities that are next to navigable rivers. However, while this is a blessing, it can also be a curse. And the reason why that is because navigable rivers aren't that good. Don't get me wrong, I love the yields on them. I look at the yields, I'm like, man, that's good. But then you're like, 6 food? Like, what am I doing with 6 food? It's going to take me 30,000 food to reach my next citizen. Do I really care about 6 food? It looks good. Don't get me wrong, it looks great. But it's not actually good. And that's the part that hurts the most about navigable rivers. When it comes to tempo, going into navigable rivers early hurts a lot because you need to go into sailing. And because you're going into sailing, there's really nothing for you to do there other than just like get your fishing key out. So the trouble is not so much with Hatchepsut and navigable rivers, but rather the design of the tech tree, because it means that you have to go into sailing, you're delaying everything else. Now, because you went into sailing, you have to go and delay going into your monument or delay going into your library, and that's going to just delay everything else. It makes it so much harder. On top of that, +1 culture for every imported resource. It's going to be a while before you start importing resources. They come online at Code of Laws. Now, technically, you can play Axum and you can get them a little bit earlier, but this isn't a huge bonus. definitely nothing that's monumental. So I think for her, the biggest issue is just the fact that her bias, in fact, hurts her more than it really helps her. On top of that, you feel a little bit locked into where you can expand when you're playing Hatchepsut. You try and look for these expansions that are going to be on navigable rivers. And it means that all of your cities have to be on navigable rivers if you want to take advantage of this bonus. Now, of course, you don't have to take advantage of the bonus, but you want to, right? Like that's the whole idea of picking the leader in the first place, to get the bonus. So that's it. Realistically, you're mainly looking to pair her with Egypt. I can't see it going any other way. And because of that, it's difficult to justify a placement outside of D tier. I could do E tier, but look, I'm not going to hurt you guys right now. I know there's a lot of people that love Hatchepsut and think she's the bee's knees, and I got to agree. It's wonderful if you want to make a lot of world wonders, but that's about it. Let's move into our next leader for today. We are going to be going into Himiko. So we're going to start off with High Shaman. Now, just keep in mind, one of these is not like the other. One of these is very good, and one of them is not so good. So we'll start off with the one that's not very good. And the way that you differentiate between these two is one's wearing green, the other's wearing white. That's the way I've done it in my head, because I really can't tell the difference between these ones at the top. Every time I try and I look at it, I'm like, okay, I think that's the culture one. It's not. It's the science one, and it's always the other way that it works. So let's talk a little bit about Himiko and why she joins Hatchepsut down in the D tier. The reason why she joins Hatchepsut down in the D tier is not because of her happiness per age on happiness buildings, which is, sure, why not? Extra happiness is always good. Or her extra production towards happiness buildings. Now, keep in mind that includes the altar. The altar is a happiness building, so you're getting the altar, you're getting the villa, you're getting the arena, and that's just in the Age of Antiquity. Obviously, once we move over into exploration, you're also going to be getting those bonuses there. The real reason why she's here is because of this last one. Plus 20% culture, but minus 10% science. And these effects are doubled while in a celebration. Okay, so there's a good component to this. Obviously, extra 20% culture. So it means we're going to be hitting our pantheons before pretty much anybody else. We just start with extra culture. But it also means that we're going to be really delayed on the other side of the tree. Now, you can kind of cancel this out, right? If you play as the Mayans, now all of a sudden you've got a really high base level of science, but now you're forced to just play the Mayans. And I don't want to say be toxic here, but just because you're good with the Mayans doesn't mean you're good. Everybody's good with the Mayans, all right? Himiko, sorry, but look, I guess the thing is Himiko's probably exceptionally good with the Mayans just because it does very much cover her weakness. So I think that we can justify saying that, she's good with the Mayans. Obviously, like, Isabella's good with the Mayans. Yeah, everyone's good with the Mayans. But Himiko in particular, it covers for her weakness. So we can definitely say that. But unfortunately, and look, I like her bonuses, cultural and diplomatic. Cultural, going to help her out even more. Now she's got 6 culture, and that's getting increased by 20%. Diplomatic happiness for her cities. So there is definitely a world where she can grow quite big. She's got extra happiness on her happiness buildings. The main thing that you're looking to overcome here is the difficulty you're going to have with science. And there is definitely a world where, maybe if you play her in a multiplayer game and you manage to get the Mayans and you're playing High Shaman, there could be a sick world where you've got a whole bunch of production from the Unique District and a whole bunch of science coming through from being the Mayans and a whole bunch of culture that's coming through from being the High Shaman, and that might work for you, but that's really niche. And it really forces you into that single play style, and because of that, she sits down here. Now, compare that to Himiko, Queen of War. And I'm not going to spoil it for you because this one is also, she's good. We'll say that much. Let's talk about why she's good. Number one, diplomatic and scientific. So similar to cultural diplomatic, we've got diplomatic scientific. Though I will say right now, I wish that it was diplomatic scientific and diplomatic cultural, not cultural diplomatic. I wonder if there's any difference between the order of these two, and like maybe they get expansion or attribute points for one of these, but not the other. Anyway, let's move forward. So the first thing is that you gain a unique endeavor called Friend of Way that can be performed in an alliance to grant you and your ally 25% science. Wow. Absolutely wow. That is insane. The amount of science that you get from this is ridiculous. It is crazy how much that is. On top of that, you also get 4 science per age for every leader you're friendly or helpful with. And I'm sure you might be thinking, well, hold on a minute, I'm not very friendly or helpful with many people. Well, hold on a minute. That's a great thing about Himiko is she can support endeavors for free. Which means that not only are you getting the bonuses from these endeavors, so if you're playing any other leader, right? Like, let's say you're playing Catherine, and somebody sends you, hey, did you want a 6 gold, or are you just going to accept it and take 2 gold? Well, you don't ever have to think about that with Himiko. you just always take the 6 gold. And it means that you can spend the influence there. Well, rather, you don't have to spend the influence there. You can save your influence, and now you can spend that influence on choosing a city-state. You can take that influence and use it on espionage. And because of that, this is incredibly powerful, not just for the fact that you are building friends, but for the fact that you're getting influence for free. But on top of that, you know, we talked about the building friends. That's a core component of this right here. The fact that you're able to support endeavors, which is the good one, that's the one that gives you the full bonus for free, means that you're now more likely to start building friendships and start being considered helpful to players, which is going to give you that +4 science. And it means that very often in games, you will just end up being friends with the entire lobby. Now, of course, there are going to be games where you've got that Xerxes who's spawned 5 tiles away from your capital, and, well, it's going to be war, okay? But there's no reason why the rest of the lobby doesn't have to be friends with you. They will all most likely be friends with you. And that's the great thing about her. She's very good at getting those relationships out. And she just gets free yields. So one of the things that I like to do with Himiko is just get a lot of scouts out. The sooner you get your scouts out, the sooner you meet all the other leaders, the sooner they start sending you deals, the sooner you start accepting them, the sooner they accept them, the sooner you start building the relationship. And remember, you get more support for building a relationship with when you support an endeavor rather than when you accept an endeavor. Accepting the endeavor is going to give you 2 yield. Where you support it, it's going to give you 6 yield, but on top of that, it's also going to double the rate at which your friendship increases. So keep that in mind. So the other great thing about Himiko is that you can play her with any single civilization. This is always going to be good. This is always going to be incredible. Doesn't matter the civilization. And in fact, you would ideally avoid civilizations that get science bonuses. So you might be thinking, all right, let's pair her with the Maya, and then that way we're getting like crazy amounts of science on top of science. You don't need to. You're just going to have a shortfall in culture if you do that. So it's one of those things where it's like she can just kind of play any civilization. You can obviously play her with the Mayans. But because of that, because of how strong she is, her bonuses to science, her bonuses to diplomacy, and just general that sort of SimCity style, she is going to go in the S+ tier just on that basis. So she's a wonderful leader. I'm a big fan of her. I love playing her, and I'm sure she's probably going to be one of the best leaders in the game for a long time to come, because this kind of play style is just always going to be a very good thing. Okay, let's move on to our next leader, someone who has risen the ranks. We've made a video about him recently. You'll know exactly where he goes. So let's go ahead and put him there right now. He's going up into the S tier. Now, keep in mind, there's a nice little asterisk that goes next to his name that says this guy could actually be in the S+ tier, but there's no guarantee that you're always going to get the good city-states. Now, he has a little bit, I will say right now, I think he's good with every single, civ, just simply because he's always going to be able to get access to city-states. That's it. So you don't have to play the Greeks. If you play the Greeks, sure, it's just going to make it even easier. But the great thing about him is he's always got access to city-states. And I think that's his whole play style, right? I don't think you can play Ibn Battuta at the S level without playing around those city-states. And the reason why is just because of these wildcard attribute points. You're allowed to go too deep in a tree, and you go into the diplomacy tree, you go down to the middle one, and it gives you the much cheaper befriending city-state option, and you just befriend every single city-state on the map and get all the bonuses from it. It is incredibly powerful. The only real downside is that, number one, city-state numbers are random. So some continents you'll get 4 city-states, some continents you'll get 10 city-states. The bonuses that you get from them can be random in the sense that maybe you'll get 5 economic city-states on the same island and only 1 science, and the 1 science gets killed by the AI, and the 1 culture that spawned got seized by the AI, and it was in the corner of the map and you couldn't find it, right? So there's a whole bunch of factors that go into this, but I will just say right now, the fact that he is S tier is simply because he is so consistent. It's not so much dependent on the spawn, it is just simply on the fact that even with like 3 or 4 city-states, he's going to be good. And that's part of the reason why. Everything else in this kit is kind of useless. Okay, +1 sight for all units, very good for finding the city-states. That's about it. Unique endeavor called trade maps that allows you to gradually see the other leaders claim territory, completely useless. Don't even bother. I will say right now, kind of useful in the age of exploration. You can meet a leader and then immediately do this, and then you can send a trade route to the, like, you know exactly where to go. There'll be some games in exploration where I just can't find the capital, and this kind of solves that problem, but for antiquity, absolutely useless. Don't waste your influence. Yeah, Ibn Battuta is an incredibly strong leader. However, our next leader, ladies and gentlemen, a fan favorite, Isabella. Someone that we put as the only S+ leader on our very first tier list, Isabella. Where does she go today? She gains 300 gold every time you discover a natural wonder. So that's not just the fact that you have an incredible bias to find natural wonders or spawn on natural wonders, but every time you find them as well. So if you find 3 or 4 natural wonders, that's 1,200 gold. That's a lot of gold. And that's obviously doubled if it's in distant lands. A little bit less relevant because by that time you're probably already making about 300 gold per turn. And then 100% tile yields from natural wonders. Very good bonus. And then these ones a little less relevant. 50% gold towards purchasing naval units. We're not really purchasing them. Maybe at the beginning of the exploration age, we definitely look to purchase 1 or 2. And then -1 gold maintenance for naval units. Okay, not bad. So she gets bonuses to naval units and natural wonders. So the key thing here is just the fact that it's natural wonders, right? We get a bonus towards natural wonders. And with this, it just guarantees that she is going to have gold throughout the game when she finds those natural wonders. She's going to be able to turn them into cities. Those towns into cities because she's got all of this gold that's coming through. But the big thing here, the big key, the main reason why people pick Isabella, why they love Isabella, is because of her bias. Her bias is natural wonders. She is more likely to spawn on a natural wonder than anybody is more likely to have anything else in their bias. It is incredible how often it happens. I did testing. I did 100 games with Isabella, and I spawned on a natural wonder 79 times. So I gave it a 79% chance that you get it. In fact, you have more chance to spawn on the Redwood Forest than you do with no wonder. So the Redwood Forest was, if I remember correctly, 24% chance, and no wonder was 21% chance. So it's, look, and Redwood Forest is very good. The only issue that I've got with Isabella, and this is one of those things that we need to consider, consistency. There are times, those 21%, that you don't get a natural wonder. Okay? I'm happy to, let's discount those. But then there are the times that you get natural wonders that aren't good, or that you don't want, they're not good for Isabella, right? Because there's a difference between good natural wonders and good natural wonders for Isabella. So as an example, the Grand Canyon. Incredible natural wonder. Oh my, if I find the Grand Canyon, I tell you what, I'm settling it immediately. And I'm going to try and settle 4 cities around it so I can take advantage of the bonus in all 4 of those cities. But for Isabella, she actually wants to be working the tiles. And that's what makes it difficult, because it's very much dependent on the yield that those tiles give you. So even if you manage to spawn with a natural wonder, which you probably do most games, there's no guarantee it's going to be a good one. And because of that, it really increases the variance of Isabella. There's no guarantee that you're going to have a good game. Now, of course, you can just reroll. Absolutely. But we're not considering a reroll. We're just talking about in general. Okay, so if you were talking about rerolling, she's probably S tier. If we're talking about no rerolls, which we are, unfortunately for Isabella, she has fallen off her crown or fallen off her perch. She's down in the A tier. Yes. Oh, how the great have fallen. How the mighty have fallen for Isabella. But speaking of other mighty leaders, it's time for us to move on to the Rizler, Jose Rizal himself, the fan of the Filipino fans, or the leader that all Filipinos are fans of. Let's go with that. Of course, it's their countryman, Jose Rizal. And look, I'm going to hit you with it right now. I'm not a fan of him. There are some good things about Jose, and there are some things that just kind of, I think they still need to be explored. Let's put it that way. So he starts off with cultural diplomatic, which in my mind, the cultural bonus is great early on. The diplo, it's great once you start getting those cities. The trouble is, I think he's only really good with one civilization, and it pairs well with him because his natural bias is a bias towards tropical. So what I like to do, I mean, and it's one of those things, right? This is the whole Buzz Lightyear thing. It's like, yeah, well, I'm good with the Maya. It's like, yeah, so is every other leader. Come on. Anyway, it's with the Maya. So basically, he gets additional rewards from narrative events, an extra 20 culture, an extra 20 gold. We've got more culture. Wonderful. So let's balance it out with a little bit of science, a little bit of extra production. Wonderful. Only trouble is, and I think that this will get, as time goes on, the Rizla will get better as people uncover more of his events. Because at the moment, it's just like, hey, just meet all the other leaders. And he gets other events throughout the game, but there's not a lot of them, at least to justify this. Like, if this was an extra, I don't even know the number, dude. It just doesn't feel impactful. That's it. One thing that is impactful, though, 50% celebration duration and 50% happiness towards celebrations. Now, this can be a bad thing, but it can also be a good thing. Ideally, we do want longer celebrations, right? The longer we're celebrating, that means the more of the bonus that we're getting. Maybe it's an extra 20% culture. Maybe it's an extra 20% production towards buildings. It's something. Maybe it's an extra 20% gold in the exploration age. It's good, right? And we get extra happiness towards celebrations. That means that every point of happiness that we're truly getting 1.5 points. But this isn't really like, wow. It doesn't drive it home. These are good bonuses, but they're not great. They don't stand out from the pack. And because of that, it's very hard for me to justify putting the Rizla in any tier other than the D. He joins a very sad state of affairs down the bottom side there. And I think with Jose, and it's important to remember this, as we get better at Civ, not even as we get better at Civ, as we uncover more about civilization and we learn, oh, this is how you get his narrative event to proc. You need to do this. Because narrative events are kind of wild, right? Like, if you have a flood, then you get a narrative event for a migrant or a warrior. Or if you complete a monument, then it's going to give you another narrative event. Once we know every single event for him, then maybe that's when he starts to move up, because no longer is this just 20 culture and gold per age from a narrative event that happens 3 times. All of a sudden, it's a narrative event that happens 16 times because we did all the little things to proc. We settled a city next to a navigable river. We built a monument under a mountain. All of these little things, and they start to build up, and eventually we can go, hey, no, this is a meaningful bonus. Maybe people start optimizing him for the Oracle, the World Wonder. So there's a lot of little things to consider here, but realistically, at this point in time, that's where he sits. Let's talk about somebody who's up the other end of the scale, though. Lafayette. Lafayette, wow, what a leader. You know, when it comes to consistency, I don't think you really get better than this guy. Lafayette is just incredibly consistent, an incredible leader, so powerful. The first thing I want to highlight is this, because this is a bonus that I think people will often look over, and it's just massive, bro. This is incredible. 2 culture, plus 2 culture and happiness per age in settlements. So you just start the game with plus 2 culture and happiness. We don't really care about the happiness. It's nice, don't get me wrong, but the culture is the big thing. So I just get plus 20% culture from the beginning of the game, and then I settle my first town. That's another 2 culture, and then I get a second town because I'm rushing settlements. And then I go over the settlement limit because I've got extra happiness per age from my settlements. So now I'm at 4 settlements, and I've got an extra 8 culture. And that's so crazy, dude. That is insane how much culture that is. And of course, you can combine that with other civilizations. You can combine that with things like Rome and get that even better. But the truth is, with Lafayette, any civilization, it doesn't matter. They're incredible. He's just a perfect combination for pretty much any single civilization just because of that. Now, further to that, you also get 1 combat strength for every tradition, but not policy slotted in the government, which means that you can look at playing him with very obvious choices like Rome. That's the one that stands out. I'm sure most people see that because they've got a unit which gets bonus combat strength for every tradition that's in the government. So now you've got a leader that gets bonuses. You've also got a unit that gets bonuses for traditions in the government. They've also got a unique plaza. A unique quarter that gets bonuses for every tradition in the government. You want traditions. He wants traditions. On top of that, if you don't have space for traditions, he's got the unique policy reform. But generally, I don't think you're going to need this unless you're really going over your happiness or your settlement limits a lot. Generally, you should have a lot of policy slots as Lafayette just because of this extra happiness. It's kind of crazy how quickly it builds up, because remember that your towns start with a base of 3, and then your first citizen's typically going to jump to a tile that's probably got a happiness on it. So that's 4, and then he gives an extra 2. So now you're up to 6 that's contributing every single turn towards that celebration. So these really do go quite hard. I'm a big fan of Lafayette. I think he's incredible. He's great from a SimCity perspective. He's got that bonus for culture. He can build up incredibly quickly. He's great from a defensive perspective. He's always going to have that combat strength in the back pocket just in case he needs it. And that's really what makes him so strong. And because of that consistency, because he can go with any single civilization, he goes up in the S tier. He joins Ibn Battuta up there. He's amazing. Now, one thing that we didn't talk about was civilization recommendations. We talked about the Greeks here. Makes sense. Isabella, she can do any single civilization. I think she's absolutely great with any of them, but also with Greece, I think she's very good. So just that recommendation. Mayan as well. One thing to note, and I think this is probably something that will be optimized with Isabella, different civilizations have different biases depending on where they're going to spawn, right? So if we look at the Mayans, they've got a bonus for tropical. If I remember correctly, the Mayans have a bonus for tropical and vegetation, or it might just be tropical. Either way, though, we know that there are specific there are specific natural wonders that spawn in the tropical region. So Zhangjia is one that spawns in the tropical region, and that's a good natural wonder. So you want to spawn in that. So if you can pick the Mayans, there's a higher chance that you roll a natural wonder that's in the tropical zone, and it's a good one. Right, so I think this is one of those things that will come with Isabella. They'll say, no, you have to pick Isabella with Maya because then you guarantee yourself that you'll get at least, one of these world wonders. So anyway, that's the other thing. I mean, then there's also, you can pair her with Axum and then you get a coastal bias. Now, keep in mind, she actually has a coastal bias as well. So you're kind of doubling down on that. And then maybe you get Great Barrier Reef more often. it's one of those little things. For the Rizal, the Mayans, and for Lafayette, Rome, that's the recommendation. Now we move into Machiavelli. Oh, Machiavelli. Yes, look at that mug. He knows exactly where he's going, and I'm sure you know exactly where he's going as well. And honestly, like, the biggest thing for Machiavelli is just the influence per age. It is wild how good this is. 3 influence per age. What are you going to do with it? Well, what are you going to do with it? You're going to take more city-states. That's the first thing that you're going to do. You're going to be sending out more of your diplomatic and economic agreements and hoping that they get rejected, definitely not getting accepted, because you're going to be getting gold from that. You get 50 gold when they're accepted or 100 gold when they're rejected. So it's in your interest to be upsetting people and sending them agreements that they don't like, and then you're going to be getting gold from it. And very often you'll be able to send out a single agreement and everyone's going to reject it, and you're just going to make yourself a whole bunch of money. And what are you going to do with that money? You're going to turn it into cities. Yeah, there is something beautiful about Machiavelli. The fact that you could just grab all of the city-states quite early on with this extra influence, and you could turn all of your towns into cities very easily with this gold. And it is consistent. It is consistent. That's the great thing about him. Now, he's also got the ability to levy troops from city-states you're not a suzerain of. I haven't really found a use for this yet. I'm sure there could probably be circumstances where it makes sense if perhaps you're looking to defend yourself in a certain region and you need a unit there immediately and you don't have the gold for it. So you could do that, but yeah, not a huge bonus. And then ignores relationship requirements for declaring formal wars. This is what actually breaks Machiavelli in multiplayer, just simply because you can be friends with somebody and then you can declare a formal war on them. And there's no bonuses that they receive. They don't get any influence, so there's no diplomatic incident that is sparked. They don't get any influence that they can put into their war support. And because it's a formal war, there's no war support in their favor. And it means that you can basically just march troops up to someone's border, declare formal war immediately on them, and they've got no idea that it was coming. Normally, you have to denounce them. You have to go through that process, and that's another thing that you're doing. You're saving influence. So when it comes to Machiavelli, his power is incredible. When you're looking at these, typically you're going to be comparing him with the Greeks. They're incredibly good, but once again, he can just play any single civilization. He goes in the S tier. We've definitely got a little bit of a top-heavy leaderboard or tier list at the moment, but I'm confident we'll sort it out a little bit later, and we'll get that nice bell curve that we always like to see on tier lists. All right, next up we have got Napoleon. Napoleon the Emperor. Now, Napoleon the Emperor is a bit of a difficult one because he's very similar with regard to Friedrich, and I feel like there's only one way to play him. And look, I could be wrong, and I wouldn't be surprised if I am, but this is the only viable way I've found to play him so far. And that way is to just be an absolute asshole. The idea is simple. You pick him, you pick the Han civilization, you've got access to the Jukunu, and that's got 5 combat strength when attacking adjacent units. You put them on your Great Wall tile, which gives you combat strength when defending. You grab the unique Civic, which gives them increased combat strength when defending as well. And so now you've got like 15 bonus, something ridiculous. There's a huge amount of bonuses that you're getting. And the reason why you want that is because people are going to start attacking you, because people don't like you, because you are an absolute... I'm not going to say the bad word, but yeah, you're not a nice guy. So he's an economic and diplomatic leader. Once again, we're really not paying attention to this. The main thing that we're focusing on here is just going to be the fact that we are sanctioning everybody. That's the idea, because the moment that we sanction them, we're going to start getting this gold that comes through. So the more leaders that are in the lobby, the better for you, because it means you're able to generate more gold. Now, of course, we're not going to talk about mementos, but there are some really nice mementos that pair up with this. Portrait of Josephine, 2 gold per age for every leader you're unfriendly or hostile with. So now it's 10 gold per age. And if there's 5 other leaders that are on your continent, then now that's 50 gold per age, or 50 gold in Age of Antiquity per turn that you're getting, which is incredible. It's huge. It's massive how much gold that is. And you can do that with any civilization, but of course with the Han it makes the most sense, just because of all the defensive bonuses that you get. On top of that, the unique sanction that you get, Continental System, is actually really, really painful to deal with. To have -1, like, it costs a lot of influence to be running these trade routes. So to have that being put on you repeatedly is very annoying. So I think that can be difficult, right? Because it's a double-edged sword. You kind of put a target on your back. I will say the biggest weakness for Napoleon is the fact that if you do push it too far, if you go from unfriendly to hostile and then somebody declares war on you, you lose the gold per age. And I think, to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if they change it, just because why? Just give me the gold. Just give me the gold. I'm at war with the guy. He's attacking me. Let me have the gold. That's the way I think it should be. But I don't know. Maybe you think differently. Either way, I think that he's got quite a niche playstyle. I don't think it's particularly strong. And because of that, while we still have to respect him, just because of the fact that it's decent, he'll be going into the B tier here. So it's one of those things where I think that there is definitely a world where Napoleon will get... Once people uncover more ways to play with him, I think he's probably going to move up the tier list even more. But at the moment, I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense being an asshole with the entire lobby, especially when there's so many incentives to be friends with them. Anyway, let's move on to the next one. Napoleon Revolutionary. This one's a little bit more of a difficult egg to crack. I think if you're going to be playing Napoleon, the Revolutionary, you probably want to pair them up with Rome, just for the culture bonuses that you're going to be getting, because you're getting +1 movement for all lands, or for all land units rather, and defeating an enemy unit provides culture equal to 50% of its combat strength. So if you kill something with 30 combat strength, now you're getting 15 culture. And it doesn't really seem like much, but then you start adding it up, and over the course of a turn, you might kill 2 or 3 units. That could be 45. Basically, you want to be going to war with this leader. And as with this tier list, we are typically going to be favoring leaders that are good at SimCity versus good at war, just because the AI gets a lot of bonuses early on for war, and the longer the game goes, the worse those bonuses scale. It means that if you can get into a better position at that stage, you can easily declare war, but there's no real bonuses for SimCity here. The one thing I will say, and I've played Napoleon Revolutionary quite a bit, I do enjoy playing with the +1 movement for all land units. And the reason why is because it's just literally everything. Your scouts get +1 movement, your commanders get +1 movement, your settlers get +1 movement. It is really nice to try and find these little positions, and it just allows you to get around the map a lot quicker. So that is really, really nice. It also means that you can take Rome as an example, and you can grab a whole bunch of legions with high combat strength, and it's basically like you've got cavalry units now, because you've got units that can move very quickly. You can now flank very easily and get around all these different points. So I think from a military perspective, this is very, very strong. But then it comes back to how strong is military in single player. In multiplayer, as I've already said, it's quite good. There are probably better leader bonuses than this. You can pair this up with something like Bicorn Hat, which is going to be providing you +1 movement for infantry units as well. So now all of a sudden you take that and you've got +2 movement for all land units. Like, it's just that will be fun, I'm sure. But look, we're not going to do that today. Let's get rid of Bicorn Hat. I don't want it sitting there while we look at it. But yeah, overall for Napoleon, when it comes to his power level, we're going to have to stick him down the bottom. Sorry, Napoleon. You're going to go into the C tier there, my friends. It's a sad state of affairs for the French. Anyway, let's move on to our next leader. Oh, Pachacuti, eh? That's not a fun one. That's not a fun one. I know there's some people out there that love Pachacuti, and I will say right now that I think once Nepal gets released, which is a modern age civilization, the Pachacuti's probably going to become a little bit more viable. But at the moment, let me explain what I don't like Pachacuti. All buildings receive a +1 food adjacency for mountains, which means that you want to be placing your buildings next to mountains. Now, that makes sense for some buildings. You want to place your monument next to a mountain. You want to place your villa next to a mountain, and that gives you food adjacency. But you don't want to be placing your other buildings next to mountains. I don't want my blacksmith next to a mountain. I want it next to resources. Now, of course, if it's next to mountains as well, that's not bad. But the trouble is, Pachacuti's bias, his star bias, is mountains. He spawns in the mountains, and that's not good. That means that his capital, especially through the age of antiquity, has nothing that it can really do when it comes to usable tiles. It's like you spawn in the middle of the ocean, basically. Of course, there are still going to be tiles that you can work, urban tiles that you can put your districts down on. But the reality is his bias hurts him so much. It is just it. And now, once again, don't get me wrong. I think that there are games where Pachacuti absolutely pops off. I've played games against the AI where Pachacuti goes crazy because he spawned on playing as the Maya, and he's just got 750 science in antiquity. It's like, how? But they obviously get a lot of bonuses. The other thing is that specialists adjacent to mountains pay no happiness maintenance. And this is another thing where it's like, do I really want to be putting my specialist on a building that is getting happiness in the first place? Like, do I want to be putting my specialist in a villa? No, I don't. I never want to do that because I don't want to overbuild the villa in exploration age in the first place. So the only time where this would actually make sense is if you're like building the monument and the amphitheater together and you want to overbuild the monument, which just doesn't make sense because it gives you the influence into the exploration age in the first place. And then it's like, okay, well, what if it's a specialist that's next to the mountain that's in a library and a blacksmith? And it's like, well, why did you build it next to a mountain? Because, what, you had a +1 adjacent? It's painful. I want to love it. And look, there are absolutely civilizations that can take advantage of mountains once we get a little bit further on in the game. But as I said earlier, I feel like 85% of the battle when it comes to Civ 7 is in antiquity. The 14% is in exploration and 1% is in modern. By modern, it is over. It's don't at me. I'm sorry. I know that's probably going to upset a few people, but that's just the way I feel about it. And that's largely why I enjoy antiquity so much. That's why I spend so much time on antiquity, because the best way for you to have a successful modern era is to have a strong exploration era. And the best way for you to have a strong exploration era is to have a strong antiquity. That's just the way it is. And anyway, that's the way I feel about Pachacuti. I really don't like his bias. That's the part that does it the most for me. So unfortunately for Pachacuti today, he is going to be our very first leader into the E tier. But you know who's not going into the E tier today? I'll tell you that right now. It's Tecumseh. This is a leader that has absolutely risen through the tides of city-states. And he's got some incredible bonuses. When you really stop and have a look at them, you're like, hold on a minute, this is kind of wild. He's also risen quite high because of the city meta. Not just the city-state meta, the city meta. Let's talk about his bonuses. Militaristic, diplomatic, doesn't really mean much. I mean, obviously militaristic is nice if you're going to war. Diplomatic is, it's decent, but yeah, it's the main focus here is on this bad boy right here. +1 food. Okay, we don't really care about that. +1 production per age in settlements. So that's cities and towns. For every city-state you're a suzerain of. +1 combat strength for all units for every city-state you're a suzerain of. So not only are you getting growth and production, but you're also getting combat strength. Now, I will caveat Tecumseh with, I think his best antiquity civilization by far is the Greeks, just simply because he doesn't have the power that Ibn Battuta has. And with the Greeks, you have a unique civic that reduces the cost for you to be going into city-states. You can technically get this with Tecumseh quite early if you take a diplomatic point. So if you take the Treaty of Kadesh, that's going to give you the early diplomatic point, and that's going to allow you to get into city-states as well for an affordable price. But then you also have to wait for your first Suz to come through as well. That's going to delay you. So you could just play the Greeks and just look to try and go that route as well. But look, you could definitely do it on any civ, but I think the Greeks are probably his best. But the real reason why this is good is because he prioritizes city-states. He looks to try and go after them with this kind of playstyle, which is a good thing. He's also got really good mementos. Even though I know that we said we're not going to talk about mementos, I just want to quickly touch on them because I'm a big fan of Wampum Belt. I think this is going to be one of the best mementos as we move forward. +1 production per age in settlements for each city-state you're a suzerain of. So now, not just 1 production, 2 production per age in settlements. And what this means is if you've got, say, 6 settlements, okay, maybe 3 of them are cities and 3 of them are towns. Now you've got 3 production and 3 gold in every single one of those settlements, every single turn, for each city-state that you have. And because you're going after city-states, let's say you've got, we'll just be conservative, you've got 4 city-states. Now that means that you've got 4 production in 3 cities, that's 12 production, and 12 gold in those towns. This bonus really starts to add up quickly. And once it starts moving on into the later stages, because remember this is per age, once we talk about exploration, and I've got 12 cities that are all sitting here, I'm getting 24 production per turn from this in every single one of my cities. It's absurd. It's absurd. So yeah, I like Tecumseh a lot. I think that he's probably going to rise the ranks quite quickly. Once we work out this meta a little bit more at the moment though, he's quite happy up in the B tier. I think this is a good little spot for him, and definitely he's come a long way from where he once was down in the E tier. We'll say that much. So let's move on to our next leader. Now, Trung Trac. I like her a lot. Well, let's get rid of her wampum belt. She doesn't need a wampum belt. I like her a lot, just mainly because I think she's a pretty cool leader, and she can get out onto the field very quickly with her bonuses that she's got. She gets 3 free levels on her first army commander. You can combine this with somebody like Persia, and you can basically just start the game with a maxed out tree on your commander, which is kind of cool because you can just immediately get combat strength, which is huge. You also get 20% commander experience, and you get 10% science in cities that are in tropical. So she's got a tropical bias, and it's doubled when you're in a formal war that you declare. So you want to be declaring war. You want them to be formal. You want to be in tropical. There's a lot of things that are required here for Trung Trac to work. Now, there are absolutely ways that you can play Trung Trac kind of wild, right? Like there is a memento that you can get. It's hard not to talk about mementos because some of them are so dependent. So here we've got Kiam. +1 science for every commander level. So you can start the game with 3 free levels on your first army commander. Now all of a sudden you've got +3 science, and that's going to get bonuses on this. You get where it actually doesn't, because that's a city and this is a commander, so they don't that doesn't give a bonus. But anyway, the whole point is that there are multiple ways that you can play Trung Trac, and the 20% commander experience is the main way to do it. The only trouble that I've got with this is that, remember what we said earlier about the fact that against the AI, ideally, you want to be avoiding war early. You don't have to, but you want to avoid it because you've got the biggest advantage when it comes to the later stage of the age, when their bonuses have started to wear out a little bit and you've been able to overbuild and overcome. Probably shouldn't use the word overbuild. That's more of an exploration age thing. But that's essentially it. She's a militaristic scientific leader. Scientific's obviously great for the early game. Militaristic is wonderful for that extra combat strength. But her playstyle is very much focused about going to war and declaring those formal wars yourself. And then the trouble is that this conflicts, right? Because typically when you get involved in a war, there is going to be happiness losses that occur because of war support. And then that goes against the whole idea of having increased yields when you're looking to try and build up and sim city. So I think that the 10% science in cities is quite nice and when it's doubled, but the biggest thing that you're going to have is just the lack of happiness. I think that's going to hurt you the most when you go to war. So for Trung Trac today, unfortunately, she is not in the S tier. She's not even in... Well, no, she's in the A tier. We're gonna throw her in there with Isabella, and we move on to our next leader. Who have we got here? Oh, watch out. Watch out. A man who has risen very far, I will say right now, arguably one of the best leaders in the game. Xerxes, King of Kings. Why is he so good? Let me tell you why Xerxes is so good. Oh, where do I start? I know where I start. I tell you right now, because it's the only thing I care about. I don't care about 3 combat strength for units that are attacking. I don't care about the gold and the culture when you capture a settlement for the first time. I'll be honest with you. I don't even care about the 10% gold in all settlements, doubled in settlements that are not founded by you. Even if he didn't have that, I think he'd still be S+ tier. I care about it because of this. +1 settlement limit per age. Now, you might look at that and think, okay, that's not that big of a deal, but I will explain why it's such a big of a deal. When we look at civilizations and we look at how we rate them, we look at Axum and we say, okay, well, Axum doesn't have any ability to increase its settlements at all. So we rate that lowly. But hold on a minute. If I was to rate Persia, who get 2 settlement limits, I would also rate them lowly. And the reason why is because if you want to unlock the settlement limits that are for Persia, they are a culture sink. You need to sink a lot of culture into getting these unique settlements, or these settlement limit increases, and you don't really gain much from it. Now, there are exceptions to this. As an example, the Han get theirs. I'll have to double check. I think they get it on the very first one. I can double check, but I'm pretty sure the Han get their settlement bonus on the very first unique civic, which means you don't have to sink a lot of culture into it, and that makes it more powerful. The point that I'm trying to make here is that Xerxes starts the game with it. He just gets the settlement limit from the very beginning of the game. This isn't coming online at turn 80 or turn 90. This is coming online at the very beginning of the game. And what that means, and there's so much ramification for this, that initially you look at it and you think it's not that big of a deal, and then you start doing all the math and you're like, hold on a minute, this is really starting to add up now. So just I don't want to talk your ear off right now, but we'll just run with a standard opening. Okay, you've got 3 out of 3 settlements. You can go to a 4th settlement if you do that. Now all of a sudden, -5 happiness to all of your cities or all of your settlements. Okay, so now you're down 20 happiness. That means your golden ages are slower, or celebrations are slower, and your yields might start to take a hit. It also means that you're not able to get the bonuses from your celebrations. It also means you're not going to get the extra policy slot for your celebrations. However, for Xerxes, his 4th settlement doesn't deduct happiness. It adds happiness. While you got -20 happiness, Xerxes actually got increased happiness because every time you settle a town, it has a base happiness increase on it. It gives you +3 happiness from the city hall. And then, of course, your first citizen comes out, and now that first citizen is going to contribute happiness as well. And so now what's happened is that not only has Xerxes got that extra city and hasn't gone unhappy, but he's gotten more happy. And because he's gotten more happy, he can roll that into more celebrations. And more celebrations mean more policies. More celebrations mean whether it's plus 20% culture or plus 30% building or production towards buildings or 20% growth, whatever it is that you want, now you're able to do that. And I find myself playing with Xerxes just perfectly normally staying within my settlement limit, and I will be on my 3rd celebration by like turn 50. It's like, how? How is this even possible? It just doesn't feel fair. It is crazy. And then obviously, like, just the extra settlement limit per age, it just gives you so much flexibility. So much flexibility when you're playing as Xerxes, and that just goes through every single stage of the game. It also means that if you want to go over the settlement limit, it's not going to punish you as hard. Obviously, it's a bigger problem when you go from 4 to 5, or like a 5 out of 4 versus 4 out of 3. But the final thing that I want to say about this, and this one, it's probably not as obvious, but with the city meta, the reason why he is so strong with this is if we think about that scenario again, okay, 4 settlements, you're at 3 out of 4, he's at 4 out of 4. Because of that, now when you convert over your city or your town to a city, he can actually keep one of his out there for longer. What I mean by that is that he is generating gold from that town. So in this situation, he could even go over the settlement limit. Let's say you're at 4 out of 3 and he's 5 out of 4. Now, when you convert that first city over, he's got an extra town that is working for him, and the only cost that he has to pay for it is the fact that he had to make the settler. Everything else, he's suffering the same burdens that you are, and it means that he is able to generate more gold in the early games. I don't think I've really expressed this last point well, so I apologize for that. We're at an hour and 20 minutes, and look, probably only the OGs are here at this stage, so I'll try and explain it again. Sorry, I don't want you to. Anyway, we're almost finished. If you're at 3 out of 3 versus Xerxes, who's at 4 out of 4, if you convert your second settlement to a city, so you go from 1 city and 2 towns to 2 cities and 1 town, you've got 1 town now that's contributing gold to your economy. But Xerxes, because he's 3 towns and 1 city, he goes to 2 cities and 2 towns. And basically what that means is that he's got double the towns. And because he's got double the towns, he's now generating double the gold. And because he's generating double the gold, that means the next town that wants to convert to a city comes online sooner. That's the whole, that was what I wanted to say. Anyway, yeah, I mean, you know where he's going. Xerxes is absolutely going in the top of the table. There's no other place for him. However, there is another place for his friend, the Achaemenid. Xerxes. Not a whole lot of stuff going on here. I think the biggest thing for this Xerxes is the fact that you get culture and gold per age on unique buildings and improvements. It means that, like, you can pair this up with a scientific city-state or with pocktops, or sorry, not with pocktops, with hill forts, and you can actually get some real value out of this. When it comes to the trade route limit, I feel like this is just meh. Like, it's just 30, what is it, 60 influence or something like that, times 3? That's not a whole lot. Or times 4, however many leaders you've got that you want to trade with. It's not a huge deal. And I mean, at the point where you're asking for extra trade limits, you're typically not going to be noticing it, though there is an argument that you probably want to trade earlier with him because you do get the culture and the gold. So there is definitely that, but it does force you into a specific playstyle. I wouldn't say that it necessarily forces you into it, but you want to try and play around that trading merchant style game. That's the whole idea with this leader. But I don't think that's particularly strong, especially when you compare it to the power of cities. I think when it comes to merchants, you don't want to be revolving your playstyle around it, but you still want it to be part of your gameplay, and that's for every single leader. It's not just for Xerxes, the Achaemenid. But because of that, I don't rate him particularly highly. We're going to be putting him in the C tier. And there it is, ladies and gentlemen. We have finished it. After an hour and 22 minutes, that is the very first tier list for Civilization 7 that we're happy to publish on the YouTube channel. Obviously, we've been doing tier lists this entire time behind the scenes on the Discord. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to join. Check it out. There's a lot of good stuff that's over there. But this is the first time I've felt confident enough to come forward with a tier list and say, you know what? I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. I think this is looking pretty good at the moment. Anyway, we're going to leave it there. If you've enjoyed the video, I encourage you, leave a like on the video. It really helps out the traction. Make sure you hit the subscribe button if you're looking forward to more Civilization 7 content because, well, there's always time for one more turn.